Welcome to Sexually Charged Radio, co-hosted by Ruth Newstifter and Thomas Sasso.
We and our guests discuss your questions about sex, sexuality, and gender in a sex-positive, safe, and educational manner. Welcome to Sexually Charged Radio here on CFRU 93.3. I am Ruthie here with my co-host Thomas. Hi, Thomas. How are you?
I'm great, Ruthie. How are you doing?
I'm great. You're looking particularly intelligent today.
Oh, and you look very dapper yourself.
Oh, thank you so much. And we're here with our guest co-host, Ben. How are you doing, Ben?
Great. Thanks for having me back.
Yay. Ben is one of my primary partners, and I am one of their primary partners. So everybody knows why we seem so comfortable, and perhaps we know each other a bit here on the station.
And Ben, I'm your neighbor, so
I know.
I just want to be included somehow, and
you're my neighbor. You're my friend. You're a potential co-researcher if we ever get our ducks in a row for that one of these days. And
quack.
Yeah, and sometimes my drinking buddy. So there you are.
You just check all the boxes here.
All the important boxes. Yeah, well, almost all the boxes.
Almost.
So we have some great questions that came in through our email inbox. What's our email, Thomas, since I can't remember things?
Our email is asksc@uoguelph.ca. And so just to spell it out, that's ASKSC@UOGUELPH.ca.
And those emails will go into the fine student interns over at Student Wellness, which is part of Student Affairs. And they check out the questions. They send some our way. They do some great background research for us about things at times. Sometimes they co-host with us. They do all the wonderful editing for this show. So there's a high student involvement in this show, which I think makes it better.
And we're so grateful for all of their work and all of the individuals over at Wellness. They really make this show possible. We're just the voices and the talking heads.
The cheap talent. Yep, absolutely. So let's introduce ourselves just a little bit. Ben, would you like to introduce yourself first this time?
Okay. I am Ben. I am one of Ruth's primary partners. I am a statistician, and I work in medical trial analysis, but I also do a lot of research and work and interest stuff in gender studies, feminism, mental health, all that sort of stuff.
You also like board games.
I love board games. We have 300 of them.
And that's not even exaggerating because you have an actual count of our board games.
I do.
Do you have an Excel sheet that sort of keeps track of?
There's a website called Board Game Geek, and you can log every game you own.
And every game you play.
That was free advertising for Board Game Geek.
Thomas, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Thomas Sasso. I'm a graduate PhD candidate at the University of Guelph in industrial and organizational psychology. I always like to try to give a fun fact about myself, and I have no fun fact about me today.
How tall are you, Thomas?
I am 6'3" in the evening and 6'4" in the morning.
There's a fun fact about Thomas.
Okay, there it is. And how about yourself, Ruthie?
I'm 5'7". Thanks for asking. That was so witty. I'm Ruth Newstifter. So I am a faculty member over in family relations and applied nutrition in the couple and family therapy program. So I teach student interns who are learning to become therapists. And I also teach a few undergrad classes as well. I co-chair the Guelph Sexuality Conference and a few other different things that I do. And my main areas of study are sexual well-being and pleasure for diverse populations, so sex queer, gender queer, and diverse and non-traditional structures of relationships. And I also look at resilience after trauma, so how people do well when bad things are happening or have happened in the past, and also what doing well means to different people. And doing this radio show is something I've kind of always wanted to do, so I'm excited to be here with both of you. And we have received some questions about things to do with non-monogamy. So, Ben, did you want to read the first question out loud?
I would love to. Thank you. My girlfriend and I are opening our relationship up, and I'm having trouble being jealous. How do I deal with this?
That's a fantastic question, and so many thoughts are going through my head at once. But Thomas, you look like you were ready to jump right in, so go for it.
Wow. Okay. So, we always try to do just what's our first impression? Yeah, whenever we get a question, first impression on the question. And this one, my first impression is that this is such a common response I hear from so many individuals. Anytime, whether the couple or a group of partners are talking about bringing someone new into a relationship, at any level, or if it's the first time they've done it, or the second time, or the umpteenth number of time, jealousy I've heard time and time again. So I just like the letter writer or the email writer to know that you're definitely not alone in asking this question. So many others are out there also asking that same question.
So the first impression, the first thought that came to my mind is you have a partner who wants to go non-monogamous. I'm remembering this correctly, right? Ben, yes?
It just says we've opened up.
We've opened up the relationship. Okay, so first of all, it's okay to be jealous, and it's okay to decide to open your relationship, and it's okay to decide not to open your relationship, and all of those things are fine options. So we don't know the backstory on how this decision was made, but I hope it was a mutual decision that everyone was interested in, and there's so much more to be discussed about the question. That's the first thought that came to my mind. How about you, Ben?
That's a really good point. I guess my first impression is that, first of all, like Thomas, that's so common. I think jealousy kind of is easily paired with poly for a lot of people. And I think that it's important to just sort of recognize jealousy instead of trying to fight it. That's my first impression, is that it's an emotion that happens. That doesn't necessarily mean that anything's broken or wrong. It could be an indicator that something's wrong, but sometimes it's just an emotion that happens, and pretending it doesn't exist makes it worse. And sometimes just acknowledging, hey, I feel jealous, and just kind of embracing that and then letting it go is better.
Let's take a step back and talk a little bit about our terminology here. So the words open and poly and non-monogamy have all been used. So generally speaking, non-monogamy is possibly the largest umbrella term for all this. It just means not having just one partner. But that could look like anything from having affairs and cheating, to swinging, to casual dating, to being in love with all your different partners. So poly. Opening the relationship is still pretty broad, but it implies some sort of ongoing, perhaps formerly monogamous relationship that is going in a non-monogamous way. It doesn't mean you're in love with everybody or that everybody else is committed, or maybe you are in love with everybody and everyone's committed. The way it's open could look lots of different ways, but there's a ton of different terms for this. So perhaps as we're going, we can just kind of define our words as we go a little bit, or keep in mind that opening a relationship could look like lots of different things, and they may not even know what they want it to look like yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to use open and poly somewhat interchangeably, but I know some people make distinctions between them. For example, I colloquially, oh God, I can never pronounce that correctly. I find that people tend to use open when they're talking about physical non-monogamy, but not necessarily emotional non-monogamy, like a couple that's in love but will have sex with other people. Whereas people might use poly when there's more of a chance of emotional non-monogamy occurring as well. I don't make those distinctions as much, but some people do.
So poly is short for polyamorous, which traditionally poly meaning many and amorous meaning loves. But, language does evolve and different people use it differently, which is a good reminder to ask the other person to define words if you're talking about this too.
Mm-hmm.
You took the words right out of my mouth, I think.
But you could define them if you wanted.
But I think, getting to the email writer and, in that situation where that jealousy is being felt and someone has just sort of brought that topic forward, the first thing I would always recommend is ask the other person, what does that mean? What does that look like? What are you talking about? I maybe try to do it with a little less attitude than I do.
What are you talking about? What's going on? Who am I? Why am I here?
Yeah. But I think it's just about getting that clarification, because sometimes, and Ben brought it up really well, there can be aspects of it that maybe the individual wants open relationship physically, but is still very emotionally closed within that relationship. Or maybe they're looking to open it up emotionally and physically, or whatever the case might be. And until we step down or step back and get the full information in that situation, it's fine to be jealous, but maybe that jealousy is coming from a misinformed perspective or position.
So I'm thinking about the question around jealousy and how we all valued that jealousy is okay and jealousy is normal, but it doesn't feel very okay.
No, it feels
and
awful.
It doesn't feel very normal. No, it feels terrible, doesn't it? So, as I've disclosed on many different shows, I'm in a non-monogamous relational setting. So that means that for me, I have one long-term primary partner of going on almost 15 years. Hey, how you doing, primary?
Doing all right. How are you?
Doing all right. Thanks for sticking with me this long. And then I also have another primary partner at this point in time who's a newer partner, and they both get along with each other, right? I hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank goodness. So that's great. One of them lives with me, one of them does not. And then I also have other relationships that aren't as close or as primary. And then I also have other partners who I would not call relationships at all. So that's kind of how our structure looks. I've been doing open relationships in one form or another since long before I had a language or a structure for it, and at points sort of looked a little bit like infidelity because I didn't have a language or a structure or a way to communicate that, and also was quite young and immature at the time. So it's taken lots of different forms over my lifespan. And, so I'm not the end-all be-all expert on this, but I am the end-all be-all expert on my own personal experience of this, so I'm happy to share that part. And for me, I don't get a lot of feelings of jealousy unless I am insecure in the relationship. And that doesn't mean that the relationship is super close and tight. It just means that we have a good mutual understanding of whatever the relationship is, that person and myself. And I feel like we're both kind of living up to what that understanding is. Mm-hmm. So even if it's a very non-committed situation, if I just don't know where that stands with the other person, then I will feel jealous. Aside from those situations, I just tend to feel really happy for everybody when there's other relationships going on. And I tend to use jealousy as a way for me to realize that I must not have a firm understanding, or somebody doesn't feel like they're living up to their end of the bargain. It might be me. Now, that said, I think I'm pretty rare. I don't know many people who react this way. And even I would say that jealousy is a normal, natural part of things. But for many folks, it's a much bigger part of things. Your perspective, Ben.
Well, first of all, I would like to do a vocabulary thing, which is you were talking about how seeing your partner's happy makes you happy. And some non-monogamous people use the word compersion for that. It's sort of the opposite of jealousy.
Joy in the other person's joy.
Exactly. So in case you ever hear poly people tossing around the word compersion, that's usually what they're referring to. It's interesting that you brought up insecurity, because for me, that's often where I find jealousy stems from, but not necessarily insecurity in the relationship. Well, I guess kind of, but for me, it's about insecurity in myself. I tend to find that when I'm feeling jealous, it's often because I am not feeling secure about myself. I'm feeling low self-esteem-y that day, or I'm worried that the other partner has something to offer that I don't, or something like that. And so for me, often jealousy is about stepping back, acknowledging that the jealousy is sort of a symptom of some deeper thing that's going on with me, some sort of low self-esteem or depression or whatever it is. So for me, often dealing with jealousy is acknowledging it's happening and finding out why I'm feeling it rather than just going, I'm jealous, something's wrong with the relationship.
I think it's also just important to notice that jealousy doesn't have to mean that the person feeling it has a problem. Mm-hmm. It can also mean that the other person is not living up to their stuff, or it could just be that you're a natural, normal human and you're having a little flare-up of the jealousy thing, and that's also fine. Because I will fairly frequently get brief flashes of it. It just goes away quickly enough that I have learned that it will go away quickly. Thomas, where are you with all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important in terms of self-disclosure. I'm in a monogamous relationship.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. And I only say that not to be boastful of my life, maybe a little.
I think we should all brag about our relationships and our singlehood.
It's a humble brag.
But I think it's just important in situating myself in this conversation as,
Sure.
In relation to not knowing within my current state or not being able to pull from my current personal experience some of these conversations.
But monogamous people get jealous too.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was going to pull in a little bit, is that I think we also need to recognize that when we feel jealousy, or when that, whatever we want to call that word, the envy or that insecurity, that part of it can also be socially constructed. We're raised to believe in one man, one woman. Ooh, ah. That's my barbarism.
I'm not feeling that. Oh, okay. Yeah. Don't make a porn tape.
Clearly, I cannot be a caveman without it coming across otherwise. And, we have this social influence that's saying this is what we should be expecting. And, that one man, that one woman are in a relationship. The man proposes to a woman, married until the time they die. Well, that's not really how the world works. And I don't know that's the way the world has ever worked. But it's become some of the dominant imagery that's out there. And so our jealousy can sometimes stem by saying, well, that person's not living up to this expectation, this ideal, or I'm not living up to that expectation and ideal. And so recognizing that maybe it's not something to do with the relationship that you both have or the multiple individuals have, but just the relation of the influence of society on you and its expectations. So that jealousy that you're feeling, maybe giving yourself a bit of a break about it and just saying, you know what, I'm feeling it. It's okay to feel it, like we've said. But it's also, I'm not feeling it because of us. I'm feeling it because how external forces are putting that pressure on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there's a lot of romanticizing too. So the pressure can also feel like a positive thing. So we romanticize jealousy. Oh, they must really want me. They must really love me. And we romanticize a sense of ownership with our partners too. Like I get a sense of ownership over your time or over who you spend time with. And, if that is something that is mutually agreed upon and it's not a power and control issue in the relationship, so it's not an abuse sort of thing, then people can negotiate that out however they want to. But we have in North American culture, we promote a sense of jealousy as a proof of love. If your partner doesn't get jealous, they must not really love you or want you. So sometimes we see jealousy in that real bonus way too. And it's a lot of habits to unlearn, to think to yourself, what are the underlying things of this jealousy? Are there any? How do I restructure showing my love or feeling like I'm loved by my partner? And that unlearning and that restructuring time can also lead to a lot of jealousy and negative feelings as well. So it sounds to me like the email writer is talking about a newer situation that they're trying to navigate. I'm feeling like they might benefit from Tristan Taormino's book on open relationships. Ben, did you want to talk about that?
I was going to plug that book, but go ahead.
No, go for it.
Okay. So I think the best resource that I point people to regarding non-monogamy or polyamory is Tristan Taormino's book, Opening Up. It's a fantastic book. It approaches it in a kind of like objective clinical way, and each chapter is devoted to a different sort of non-monogamous relationship structure, which means you can kind of pick through it like a menu and figure out which types of relationships appeal to you and which ones you can read that chapter and be like, oh, no, I don't want my relationships to work like that.
It's a great guide. Tristan's also just a great person, a great educator. So it's nice when great books are written by amazing people. One of my favorite take-home messages from that book has to do with when someone is telling you that they feel hurt or they feel jealous in the relationship, to not offer to stop having an open relationship or to not personally apologize. So it may be in the long run that you do decide to stop having an open relationship. But when you personally apologize or say, oh, I'll stop, or I won't go on this date with this other person because it hurts you, it doesn't allow the other person to process their feelings in the same way. It in a way kind of shuts them up.
It makes the conversation about you instead.
Absolutely. So to have a situation where one can discuss with one's partners the jealousy and the other feelings that they're feeling and feel like they can go ahead and have that conversation without obligating the other person to do or be anything different.
Go ahead.
No, after you.
I had one more quick thought that is like 5 minutes back.
Do it.
Thomas used the word envy. And I think that's interesting because I actually make kind of a pretty strong distinction between jealousy and envy. And I find that I often would go, I'm feeling jealous when in fact I'm feeling envious. So if a partner of mine is like, say, going out on a romantic jazz date or something, right? And I'm sitting at home like fuming to myself about how jealous I am. It may be that I don't actually care that my partner's out on a romantic date to music. It's that I would like to be on a romantic date to music. And it actually doesn't even matter if it's that partner that takes me or not. And so sometimes it's important to acknowledge like, oh, I'm upset because I really want the thing that they're doing. So I should, take some initiative to set that up with one of my other partners if I'm feeling so strongly about it. And sometimes that can really help, is if you recognize sometimes you're not actually jealous, you're envious, and you should be taking better care of yourself by looking at your needs and trying to fulfill them better.
Yeah, and that's a great point at Sexually Charged Radio, which is found at 93.3 CFRU, which you can stream online at cfru.ca.
I have the email address written down, so I can say it this time. It's AskSC, that SC is like sexually charged, so AskSC@uoguelph.ca, and those emails are gone through and responded to by the wonderful students over at Student Wellness, which is part of Student Affairs. Got a question for Sexually Charged Radio? Send it to asksc@uoguelph.ca. But please do note that not all questions are guaranteed a response or acknowledgement on the show. We'll let you know if your question's been selected for discussion. Your name will be omitted from the show, but your question will be read out loud if selected. This account is monitored by a peer wellness educator from the Wellness Education Center at the University of Guelph, not by the host of this program.
Yeah, so right now we were just talking about jealousy within open relationships, and Ben was talking about the component or distinguishing between envy and jealousy. And I think that's a really key distinction, and I'm glad you pointed it out. And I think for the email writer too, to think about, well, when you're, what you've identified as jealousy, could it be that there's some envy there? Could it be that what your partner has raised to you is something that you're interested in doing? And if that's the case, having that conversation about, okay, well, what is it that you're looking for in opening this relationship or not opening this relationship?
I think it's also important to think about opening a relationship doesn't have to mean a free-for-all, nor does it have to mean a plethora of rules. So sometimes people just say, let's just open the relationship, and they don't talk about what that actually means and what their expectations are and what their boundaries and limits are and what they expect of their partner and whatnot. Have you sat down and really kind of thought about all the areas in which you may have expectations, wants, or needs that may change, but where they are right now as you're beginning to open the relationship? And really just charted and documented those out and made a decision to come back and revisit that in a little while to see how it's going. It's okay to have needs and boundaries and rules within an open relationship.
Absolutely.
And it's also okay to want fewer boundaries and rules within a relationship. And so you have to work that out mutually with the other person. Communication is such a big key in open relationships. And also, not every person or every relationship will function well open. So you may find out that opening the relationship just doesn't work with this particular person, and that's okay. Or you may find out that it just doesn't work at this point in time, and that's also okay too.
So Ruthie just brought up, there are things to have those conversations about. Ben, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about what are some of those good conversation points to have? I know it really puts you on the spot.
No, that's a fantastic question. There's just a lot. I mean, if we're going to talk about non-monogamy, and particularly I find that a lot of people kind of dip their toes in non-monogamy by starting with physical non-monogamy rather than emotional. So I think one of the important things to talk about is sexual safety. I find that, I think that's a really good point to talk about is like, what are your expectations regarding protection with other partners?
So using barriers, birth control, things like that.
Exactly. And maybe what sexual activities may or may not be just entirely off limits as well.
Either from a safety perspective and a personal perspective.
Yeah, I was going to say from a jealousy or, emotional perspective as well. There are some things that you may just not feel comfortable with your partner doing with other people. Or
that you both like just having special to one part of the relationship.
I think talking about time commitments is another important thing. Especially if there's a lot of like dating and non-monogamy going on, is scheduling stuff's hard. Like even just having a monogamous relationship is like an adventure in Google Calendars, and then throwing in a third or a fourth or a fifth person can make that really complicated. So I think it's important to talk about like, what are your expectations for how much time your partner sets aside for you? When are important dates that like your partner needs to not be, blocking off with other people? And vice versa. Obviously, you need to be giving as well in terms of what your partner needs.
So I think about what makes each relationship special and what we can do to preserve and enhance the things that make the relationship special, and have the additional relationships also be in the service of the existing ones. So, for instance, if going to bed at the same time is really special, putting a priority on that. If, Friday date night is really special, or if, having Netflix time is really special, whatever, or certain pet names that you use with each other but not with other people.
It's important they don't get ahead in that one Netflix show with the other partner.
Netflix cheating.
No.
That's just not right. I draw the line.
Exactly. So no, I've never done that. So those things that you set aside that make a relationship special, right? And those are things that we have in monogamous relationships as well as open. So making sure that you're not undermining those things, because that will often trigger jealousy in a partner, and rightfully so. Everybody wants to feel special and deserves to feel special. Every relationship wants and deserves to be special. But what makes something special is different for everyone. So for some folks, it's the monogamy is a big part of making it special. For folks who are non-monogamous, then you have to pay a little more attention, figure out the complexities of how to best honor all those relationships and partners.
So Thomas, you're the one who asked that. Did you have anything in particular in mind?
I think you both covered some of the key things that I would think of, how those conversations or the questions that you'd want to raise, or the comments you'd want to make. The only part that I guess would be interesting for me to get your perspectives on, if Ruthie doesn't knock the entire microphone.
I'm just taking your picture.
So how do you have the conversation that, I hear you want to open this relationship, I'm just not ready, or no?
Absolutely. And that's something that isn't discussed a lot, because I think that a lot of polyamory discussions tend to come from the side of being in favor of it, or at least, talking about the logistics of it. But it's perfectly fine to say, you know what, that's not the type of relationship that works well for me, or would not work well with you. You can say, like, I would be open to an open relationship, but just not with you. And that's an acceptable answer too.
I think there's an increasing amount of social pressure right now to be okay with some sort of openness, especially if you're a younger adult. And more people are talking about it. More people are seeing it as an advanced way of doing relationships, or a cooler way, or a more evolved way. And, monogamy is not right for everybody. Poly is not right for everybody. Dating anybody at all is not right for everybody. And that's okay. It's okay to not be okay with things. And it's okay to end a relationship because the two of you need different things or want to go in different directions. You don't have to give in any of these directions. You can decide that this is not the right time and place for this person in your life as well. And that's okay.
And that's no one's fault too.
Yeah. It's just, better to cut your losses. And, if you're feeling that in the beginning, have a good, honest talk about it and realize what your needs are. And maybe your needs just are not met by this person. That can be a sad and scary thing. But that's life. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. And I do encounter a lot of student age young adults who, they want so much to make these relationships work. And it's okay for a relationship to fail. And it's okay if they messed up or you messed up, or it's just not going to work. That's all right.
I would even say that just because a relationship ends doesn't mean it failed.
Good point. Yeah, staying together could be a tremendous failure.
Yeah, no. Ended relationships often, they were probably fun for a while, and that's a success all on its own. And also you learn important stuff about yourself both during the relationship and when it ends. Sometimes the ending of the relationship is when you realize, oh, I just found some deal breakers for myself, and that's good. You've just learned something.
Yep.
Yay, growth.
Absolutely.
So any last thoughts about this question? Any burning pieces that you just feel like the email writer should know, or you want our listeners to be able to think about?
If you're dedicated to having an open relationship, try to surround yourself with other people who have been doing it for a bit that you feel are good mentors, whether those are people you can actually talk with or authors and books, online community. There's larger cities tend to have gatherings of folks who have open relationships, but there's a lot of societal oppression and kind of maybe the feeling that you're kind of writing the rules as you go or inventing the wheel, and it doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah, and I would also say that when you surround yourself with a bunch of different people who do openness or poly, whether they're people or books or online communities or whatever, don't let anyone tell you what the right way to do poly is. If what you're doing is working well for you and your partners and everyone is safe and happy, then you're doing poly right for you. There's no one right way to do it, as much as some people might claim otherwise.
How about you, Thomas?
I'd say don't be afraid to make mistakes.
That's
And
good.
Nice.
in that process, be willing to forgive yourself, the other person. But the more you're open to having the conversation, the more you're open to having those discussions throughout the entire process, then the mistakes are okay and the forgiveness is there and you can grow together and individually. And those are all important parts of any relationship. But in observing many individuals in open relationships, my sense is that that's even more a necessity, the communication and openness to mistakes and getting dirty.
Yeah.
Getting dirty. Excellent. That was beautiful. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Thomas, did you want to read your question next, or should I read mine?
How about, you read your question.
All right. Sounds good. First, I have to think of it. Hang on a second here. So this email reader is saying, my boyfriend and I have been talking about becoming more serious. They have asked if we can be monogamous for the first part of the relationship and then eventually move into non-monogamy. I've always been non-monogamous, and I don't feel right about this, but I also don't feel okay with saying no. What do I do?
Oh,
So first thoughts that come to mind, I have some first thoughts already. Should I just go ahead while the two of you are processing? I mean, I had an advantage because I got to read this ahead of time.
yeah, go for it.
So there is a dating coach and relationship coach named Reed Mihalko, and one of the things he says is to always date your own species, which is a really weird way of saying this, but basically that if you're a kinky person, stick with kinky people. If you are a monogamous person, stick with monogamous people. If you're a non-monogamous person, stick with non-monogamous people. And in my anecdotal experience, oftentimes when someone says, I'm okay with opening the relationship, but I need some time being monogamous first, it is actually that they don't want to be non-monogamous. They prefer monogamy, and that's a problem that they want to deal with later, or they're hoping you might change your mind, or they think that they'll magically somehow be okay with it later. I don't think that always has to be the reason that people ask that, but that is what I keep seeing over and over again. So I am a bit worried for this asker.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of those sentiments. I would maybe go a little tangential and say, know your values and know your beliefs and your wants. Whenever you go into a relationship, you have a right to say, this is who I am. Take me for what I am, to quote Rent, because why not quote musical theater
That's
when
who
you
I was
can?
meant to be.
And I think if those are your core beliefs, I get a little worried about at the very beginning of a relationship pushing aside who you are. Now, if you're okay with that, then all the power to you. But if you feel like it's a compromise right at the beginning, then I do get a little concerned about losing your own identity as part of a relationship. But I look forward to hearing Ben's side on this.
My reaction is very similar to Ruth's in that I worry when you start your relationship off basically giving up one of your needs. Because, I mean, if you feel that you're a non-monogamous person and that you identify as that, then to me that says I need non-monogamy in my life. And so if you start your relationship off by saying, I'm going to give up on one of my major relationship needs, that's setting a really bad precedent. And also I feel that relationships are most flexible and open to negotiation in the first few months. Like you're really discovering a lot of the rules in your first portion of dating, I feel like. And so to kind of, even if you do eventually go non-monogamous, though I agree with Ruth that starting monogamous and then going that way later, to me, says that person doesn't actually want to go non-monogamous. Even if it does go that way, I feel like you're setting up this whole set of like rules and dynamics that are going to change later and when you could be spending that time setting up the relationship. I don't know.
I am thinking about the way neurochemistry changes over the lifespan of a relationship. And those first 3 to 6 months, 3 more if you're in person, 6 more if you're long distance, is a time where hormones and chemicals are so strong that you're just really addicted to the other person. You're just obsessive about them. And so I can understand during that period of time, really wanting to monopolize that other person's time and attention and wanting them to want the same of you. So I can see that, but I don't think that most people are thinking about relationships in that way when they make this declaration or this request.
Well, and I think, building off of some of our last conversations, it's thinking around that time commitment or the emotional commitment. And if you're just starting off a relationship, in those first few months, if you're now splitting some of your time between multiple individuals, that can be a harder process for individuals to accept. Oh, well, I already only have 10 hours of my week to give out for my personal life, and now those hours are being split between multiple people, and so your partner may then feel a little jilted. I just really wanted to use the word jilted.
It's a good word.
So I think it is, in those first few months, maybe it is acceptable. Maybe it is, important to realize why someone doesn't want to start right off. And because it could be that time component and just availability of resources.
Whenever someone's saying we're looking at getting serious, so they want to go monogamous for the initial part, I feel as though perhaps this person is dating multiple people, and then this person wants them to stop dating all of those people. And that concerns me a bit, that there's going to be a strong values mismatch in that way. So I don't know if this person is asking them to stop seeing other people or not for now, because there may not be any other people around right now and they just want to keep it that way for a little bit. But if they are asking them to terminate those other relationships or stop having casual sex with different people or whatever the case may be, that is a big ask. And to me, that warrants a deeper conversation about the hopes for the relationship, what makes them feel valued and special. Does this other person have any experience with open relationships? If they have a ton of experience with open relationships and they know that they do best with 3 months in the beginning of non-monogamy or 3 months of monogamy in the beginning, and that they reliably do best that way, well, then I'm going to give that different credit than if they've never done it before and they're asking for more time, because I just keep seeing this time drag on and on.
Yeah, I think for me, it was the wording of the question that made me nervous. You're right. If the person requesting the monogamy trial period at the beginning is experienced with open relationships and generally does poly, then I can see it. But I guess the wording made me nervous, in that if it's about, I want a lot of time with you when we first start dating, I would expect it to be worded that way. I'd expect it to be like, when I first start dating someone, I like to be around them a lot. And I was wondering if we could make a lot of extra time for each other in the first few months, rather than I want to completely change the relationship style for this period. That's the part that makes me nervous, because that to me says it isn't so much about any particular one aspect so much as like changing the entire dynamic of the relationship. And you raise a really good point. It's like if you're expecting the other person to cut off all their other relationships, if there are any, I mean, that is setting a precedent that's, I'm more important than all of your other partners, which I mean, in some relationships is true, but
if everybody agrees that,
yeah.
and then that's okay, then that's great. But if that's not a match between the two people, if you really want to be the most important and trump any other relationship, then monogamy is for you.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. Own it. But, for folks who are non-monogamous, I can't say that everybody's this way, but for a chunk of folks, a good chunk of folks, it's a part of one's identity. It's a part of how one lives in their happiest, healthiest way. And so to ask someone to change that, if you've never felt that way about non-monogamy, to ask someone to come to monogamy is a big request. It's asking them to give up a part of themselves that may not be happy or healthy for them to give up. It's not a simple, like, can't you grow up a little bit here? Or, can't you stop being so selfish? It's a bigger identity component.
Yeah.
Not for everyone, but for a lot of people.
Well, and, maybe taking this question also from a different angle, and in terms of the person, the letter writer or the email writer, who says that they're non-monogamous. I wonder, and we don't have this information about them, but if they've done non-monogamy themselves, or if they just feel non-monogamous.
Non-monogamous?
Yes, I could not get the word there. Because I think sometimes, too, at the beginning of relationships, it's natural to feel a little intimidated or scared about making a monogamous commitment. And so sometimes, you can say, well, non-monogamy is really important to me, and I want that to be who I am or what this relationship starts off as. And understanding, well, is it actually, you want non-monogamy, or you're just not sure about this other partner being someone you want to experience monogamy with. So
for some folks, it's not an identity, and for some folks, it is a not being serious. So that's okay, but own it and make your language clear.
Exactly. And I think just, in terms of the listeners out there and perhaps the letter writer themselves, recognizing that there could be other factors in there and understanding how your identity or preferences or behaviors are wrapped up within that relationship negotiation or within that conversation.
Absolutely. And I think so. It sounded to me like from the last little bit that the letter writer felt kind of guilty for not wanting to agree to this. And I guess it comes down to, I think we talked about this the last time I was on the show, like a relationship is each of you coming in and saying, here's what I offer, here's what I need, can we make these overlap? And sometimes they don't, and that's no one's fault. So if this person really needs you to be monogamous for the first X months or whatever, and it's important to you not to be, either because being non-monogamous is your identity or just because you don't want to be monogamous with this person and you would be monogamous with someone else if they asked, that's okay. That no one's in the wrong there. It's just your puzzle pieces don't quite fit together.
We have a lot of social stress to prove that we can make relationships work by staying together. And that's not healthy. And, speaking as someone who trains family therapists, there's a lot of pressure in our field to try to get everybody to make that relationship work, and success becomes longevity of relationship. And that's not always in people's best interests. I always say there's only 3 ways a relationship can go. If somebody disappears or dies, you break up or you stay together forever, right? And, luckily, usually breaking up is what ends up happening, because think of the first person you ever seriously dated. Do you wish you had stayed together with them forever? I'm not going to ask if you wish they're dead. I'm just going to ask if you wish if they disappeared. If you, no, oh my goodness. And that person is probably glad too, because they became a priest in my life. So there you go.
I think mine did too. I don't think she became a priest, but I think she did go on to
some sort of
Catholic
religious thing.
Yeah.
Speaking of religious thing, Ben, I have some bad news. No.
And I've got some good news. We're at CFRU. You can stream our show, Sexually Charged, at cfru.ca. And if you have questions that you're interested in having us discuss on the show, you can email us at asksc@uoguelph.ca.
And if you're local, you can be listening to us at 93.3 CFRU. We can't replace personalized professional advice of a medical or counseling nature.
While we do talk about real people's questions and real life situations, these conversations aren't intended as advice for them or for anyone else.
You were so smooth with those transitions, Thomas.
I'm just smooth in general.
Oh, you are. It's
I
true.
worked hard for that.
No comment. So I'm thinking that now is a good time to switch to our last of the 3 questions that we have time for. Thomas, what do you have for us?
So it's a really short question, and maybe it's fitting that it's the end or towards the end of the show. How do I break up with my partner?
How do I break up with my partner? So is this a short question out of a longer story? I'm trying to figure out whether this is a non-monogamous one or this is a general, just how do I break up with somebody question.
I mean, it was just written in as that.
How do I break up with my partner?
And I think, because it's part of our show on non-monogamy, we should.
That non-monogamy does tend to include a lot of breakups. Now, some people find some long-term relationships and stay with them forever and ever and ever, but generally you get good at breaking up with people or being broken up with. Ben, do you have an initial thought?
In person. I not always. It's not always true, but I find that as long as it's a situation where you feel safe, which I think is an important thing, I feel that if it's, I guess if you're using the words breakup and partner, I assume you've spent a significant portion of time together, and I feel like I don't even know how to put this.
I've got a thought.
Go for it.
3 thoughts: directly, concisely, promptly.
That's perfect. Yeah.
You are doing no one a favor by dragging it out, by making it unclear, by when you end a relationship with someone, you are no longer the person for them to turn to for the healing of the breakup.
Yes.
That is somebody else's job or nobody else's job, as the case may be. So oftentimes in a breakup, you want to try and hurt the other person as little as you can. And what that means is a good clean cut. So if the other person, if you are worried about their safety for whatever reason, maybe then that means that you let, their friend or their parent or their housemate or somebody know that you're about to do this, like really very promptly you're about to do this. So can they please be there to tend to the other person's safety? But that's no longer your job or responsibility, nor do you have a right to impose yourself that way on the other person. That's very confusing for them.
Yeah.
So dragging it out, trying to figure out the right way to say it, trying to turn it into this big deal. It's already a big deal, but conversationally a big deal. And, I would say in person might be the best, or it might not be the best. If that means you're dragging it out a lot longer, or it's becoming a bigger to-do, or it's unsafe for you as the person who's doing the breaking up, then don't.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to add the safety caveat. It's just, as a young, idiotic high schooler, I broke up with some people over instant messenger, which maybe wasn't the most respectful thing to do, so I'm bringing in that baggage.
Right. I mean, try to be as responsible and respectful as you can,
Yeah.
but maybe the person who's being broken up with doesn't want to look at your face while you say it either. I mean,
That's fair. I've got a bad face. So.
I'm thinking of people who've broken up with me, and a few of them have done it by text or email. And while I got all rageful about that, I'm kind of glad that I didn't have to have a full conversation with them.
Okay, fair. My initial impression may have been wrong.
Yeah. Well, and now if we think about this in terms of the non-monogamous situation, and now adding something into the letter writer's piece that wasn't there, and I just want to clarify and apologize to the letter writer that we're going a little further than what you asked. But if it is a breakup, and in a non-monogamous situation where there are multiple partners, and your partners still have relationships with each other, and maybe not in a partnered sense, but as friends or some other way, that they're still connected.
That's real.
Or still just connected through the community at large. And how does that play into the breakup process?
So I see a lot of situations in poly, so the type of non-monogamy where there's loving, ongoing relationships between at least some of the partners. That's the way I'm thinking of poly, is in that relationships don't end, they just transition into different forms. So sometimes they end. So there's a transition. Sometimes it doesn't have any conversation at all, and people just refer to it as polydrift oftentimes, where you just sort of realize you've drifted and maybe you should have a conversation and note that you seem to no longer be dating anymore. But oftentimes it's, this relationship doesn't seem to be working, or isn't working for me, or isn't working. Here's a different type of relationship that I think might work better. Would you be interested in switching into that with me instead? And it's a breakup of sorts, but it's also an invitation to a different type of relationship. That isn't always the case by any means with poly relationships, but I see it happening more often, and in part possibly because of that close-knit and intertwined nature of things.
Yeah.
Thoughts, Ben?
Well, I think it kind of goes along. I was still thinking of sort of more monogamous breakups, but I think it plays along with this invitation to get in other relationships as well, is that I think there's a temptation when you're breaking up with someone, or they're breaking up with you, to make each other understand everything they did wrong that led to this breakup. I think there's a lot of people follow that temptation. I think that really goes against the sort of concise, prompt, direct advice that Ruth gave. That's really good advice. It's just, if things are already breaking up, it doesn't matter who's to blame anymore, really.
Well, you're probably not even clear enough thinking to really assess that at that point in time.
My needs aren't being met, or your needs aren't being met, and it's time for this to change. And I think it's easy to get into the temptation of like, oh, just one more thing that you did wrong, and really drag it out that way. And that's something, just like they should be processing their pain or surprise or whatever with breaking up, you should be processing the breakup with people who aren't the person you just broke up with as well. Don't be Adele. Don't call 1,000 times. Like it's time for you to cut off and work out whatever you need to work out from that with other people.
And possibly by listening to Adele is the best way to do that, you know.
Sing loudly along with it. Just listen. Don't follow her advice.
Yeah, no.
That's called stalking. That's wrong.
No, Adele is not a good role model.
So this is all easier said than done, but hopefully it will also feel good to have it over with in a weird way. Don't break up with someone to get their attention. Don't break up with someone to get them to change. When you pull that kind of ultimatum, you don't have anywhere to go in the future except back to that kind of ultimatum when you need a change or you need their attention. So if you have to go that far to get that sort of thing, then perhaps breaking up really is the best idea, an actual factual breakup. Now, it's a different conversation if you say, the way things are going right now is something that I can't sustain and we need to make a switch. So that I don't need to feel, like this isn't working out. So trying to not make it a threat, trying to make it I need to let you know that things are getting quite bad for me, but I really want to work this out with you. Yeah. That's a different kind of conversation, and that's okay to have. But also keeping that in mind, don't go for the drama points with breakup. That's not kind to anyone, and more likely that you'll get stuck in a pattern of having to do that over and over again. Do we have any closing thoughts for any of these three questions that we just talked about?
For me, I guess what I think kind of is the overarching theme of this show, even if the last question wasn't necessarily about non-monogamy, is like you should know your own needs, understand them, and be open and direct with your partner or partners about them as much as possible, whether that means you're discussing jealousy and envy, whether you're ending the relationship, whether you're saying that they want a type of relationship style that is untenable with yours. But you should understand yourself first and then bring it to your partners and in as direct a way as possible. Oh, and really fast, earlier, Ruth, you brought up Reid Mihalko, and our jealousy discussion, I meant to mention that he has something called the jealousy octopus that I think is interesting. It's like a little octopus with 8 arms that's like 8 different reasons why you might be feeling jealous. And that's a really good tool for assessing maybe why you feel jealous and assessing whether it's jealousy or envy or a bunch of what needs of yours are going unaddressed. So I wanted to bring that up.
Do you think it'd be appropriate for you to pull that up and list what the 8 different things are? And maybe one of us can share our closing thoughts before you list it.
Go for it.
Yeah, so my closing thought on the show, and this episode, not the show itself, hopefully, is actually from the perspective of the partner or the other individual. And just if you are a person who your partner comes to you and says, this is my interest of opening the relationship, or this is, the feeling of jealousy that I'm having, or I want to break up with you. If you're the person receiving those forms of communication, it creates an opportunity for you to be part of that communication in most cases. And often, even in the breakup situation, of saying, okay, I understand. Maybe you don't understand right in the moment, but over time. And it's just, you are an active person in this process as well. We can't just expect that individuals are going to open up and say, I feel jealous or I want an open relationship, and that's all. Your feedback and the way that you interact with people when they say that to you is equally important. And we'll say a lot about your relationship or your partnership or who you are as a person too, in terms of how you operate and what you prioritize. So think about yourself as a receiver of that information and how you'll return that information.
Thanks, Thomas. Ben, were you able to find the octopus?
I was. Would you like to give your closing thoughts first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So first I want to plug that this is from Reid Mihalko. His website is REID, readaboutsex.com, just so I'm sourcing our material. So I won't go into describing them, but the 8 arms of jealousy that he lists are possessiveness, control, or feeling special, insecurity, loss, rejection, loneliness, fairness and equity, self-concept, feeling of inferiority, and that's envy, or longing and scarcity, which he also lists as envy.
So people can head to read about sex online to find out more information about that as well. For me, I guess the final thoughts are probably a little bit similar to both of yours, and especially Thomas's, but about knowing yourself and being okay with what you know about yourself, and that doesn't obligate other people, but to obligate yourself to yourself in a way. And that's not selfish, the word self many times here, but is a way of trying to connect with people on a more authentic level, and that isn't always going to work with everybody, and that's okay.
And maybe being selfish is okay too, to some extent too, because it means you're taking care of your own needs.
Absolutely. Well, and that's an important thing in all types of relationships, but that open relationship folks often talk about is you are, first of all, responsible for yourself, and other people share responsibility for the relationship with you, but they don't necessarily share responsibility for you with you. And that's also true of monogamy, I think, for many people. I guess I'm not going to say everybody, but it sounds good to me. All right, thank you, everybody, for listening to us for Sexually Charged Radio. Ruthie and Thomas here with our co-host this week, Ben. And it's been a pleasure talking with all of you about non-monogamy.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much. It's been great.
And thanks for listening.
Yay.